right, so I'm Mike Desjardins. I'm CEO of Virtus, and our is on leadership development. And what I decided to do through this crisis and uncertainty that we're going through right now was reach out to some of my friends that are leaders that I trust, admire, and respect, and ask them some questions about what it's like to be a leader through COVID, through this crisis, through uncertainty, to see what we could learn from their perspective. So today I have the pleasure of interviewing my good friend Ken Sim. He is a husband to Tina, a dad to 4 boys. He was the one of the 2018 City of Vancouver mayoral candidates. He is also the co-founder of Nurse Next Door and Rosemary Rocks. And he was also in 2006 and 2016 the Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year award winner. So quite the resume, Ken. Glad to have you here today. Thanks for making time for me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thanks. Thanks for having me. And listen, we've known each other for, it seems like, a very long time. And it's, thank you for your friendship. It's been great.
Yeah, I think it's going on almost 18 years at this stage. So we're not getting younger, apparently.
No.
So I'm really curious, just to dive straight in, Ken. I'm curious, let's start from the business perspective. I'm curious to see, or to understand from you, how COVID has affected your businesses.
Yeah, wow. That's a big question. Maybe I'll preface this with, we've gone through uncertain times before. Now, this one's a little more dramatic, and I know we will get through this. We just don't know how long it will be. It could be 2 years, it could be 4 years. But time we'll get through this. When it comes to our businesses, like you mentioned, we do have 2. We have a business in the home healthcare space where we take care of people's parents. And then we're in the restaurant business as well through our bagel shops. So on the home healthcare side, things are good. Now, people think that they would be phenomenal because we take care of people's parents in their own homes. But we have challenges as well. So when COVID first became a really big a big deal in Canada, we actually had a lot of people ask for our services. So we saw an increase in demand. People wanting to pull their parents out of long-term care facilities, and long-term care facilities wanting us to staff them. And that was offset by our franchise partners. Some of them didn't feel comfortable putting their people in homes. And so as a business owner and as a leader, the one thing that we realized is we probably could have done a better job communicating during a crisis, because this wasn't our first time to the rodeo. We've actually been through SARS, and countless noroviruses. And so even though you think you have it, sometimes you don't have it. And you continuously learn. And so now things are good. We've communicated well. We follow all the protocols. Our people are safe. And so our business is actually starting to pick up quite a bit. On the Rosemary Rock Salt side, like pretty much every single other restaurant in the world, we are getting our heads punched in. Our numbers are down 50 to 100%, depending on our location. And it's really challenging. And I know we will make it through this as well, because as a business owner, we've always planned for what happens if we don't have $1 in revenue for a year. And how do we keep our people, and how do we stay in business? And so you prepare, hoping you never go through it. We're going through it right now. We know we're going to come out of this. It's going to be tough, but we'll make it through this challenging time.
One of the things that I wanted to ask you about was staffing. So I was meeting with a couple of entrepreneurs, socially distanced, this weekend, and one of them has a series of liquor stores, and he was mentioning to me that his biggest challenge right now is finding part-time staff. That as great as these government subsidies have been, that he finds that there are part-time workers who'd actually prefer to be on EI right now than to actually go back to work. And so I'm curious, you've got, the kind of business that I care a lot about, which is the Main Street businesses that add a lot of culture to our cities, and Rosemary Rock Salt is one of those businesses that helps to keep Vancouver interesting, not just all full of big chains. How are you doing from a staffing perspective? Do you have enough people to keep your locations open?
Yeah, we do. I think we've been fortunate. We're a core value driven business, and so the people that we have working with us, they understand what we're going through,
Yeah.
and so everyone wants to pitch in. I actually believe in the fact that most people, the vast majority of people, are good, and they want to do what's right. And what you brought up is a real issue because I know other organizations. Now you got to realize Rosemary Rock Salt, we're still a fairly small business versus Nurse Next Door, where we actually have 8,000 employees. So it's easier to make that comment when you're a small business because it doesn't take a lot to actually have a full complement of people.
Mhm.
I do know it's an issue, and I'm not trying to knock the governments at all because I actually applaud the federal government for what they did. Um, as opposed to trying to get things perfect, they went fast and they iterated. And so, um, one of the things with going fast and iterating a bit, it's not perfect, and there are a lot of
Mhm.
things that don't necessarily work. So I think from the greater good, it actually worked. But there are holes in the system, and right now I do know there are a lot of businesses that are suffering because people are actually saying, "Well, why should like if I come in, I'm going to make the same or less than if I stayed at home." And
Mhm.
there are people that are disincented to work, which is a problem.
You bring up a really good point around the difference between, uh, or sorry, the fact that perfection can actually be the enemy of progress. As you compliment the federal government in terms of taking action and then iterating from there, as opposed to trying to get it perfect, but then it being too late to actually save a lot of businesses. I'm curious. I know we're still in the middle of this, but I'm curious as you reflect back to March 13th, and I guess really it was March 16th when everything really got shut down for British Columbia. As you reflect back over the past couple of months, which I think does feel like the past couple of years, even though it's only been a couple of months,
Yeah.
what have you learned as a leader? What's been some of the things that have been interesting take homes? You mentioned some of the things you learned with Nurse Next Door in terms of empathy for staff and that what their experience of actually having to go to work in a place and feel safe when they're providing the services. And then you've caught up with that and made sure that they have everything they need to feel safe. But anything else that you've taken away from this experience as a leader that you could share with us?
Yeah, I have a bunch of rambling thoughts.
That sounds great.
They're not going to be shared in order of importance. I think for your viewers, you have to realize this wasn't pre-planned sort of, we didn't have a bunch of pre-planned questions and scripts.
No, this isn't scripted. No.
So in no particular order, one, like I mentioned, communication. I think
Yeah.
it's super important, especially in the time of crisis, that people, you're very clear with your communication. I think, and this doesn't, the second point is it doesn't matter if you're in crisis or not. I think it's always important to be honest, regardless if it's popular or not. Be
Hmm.
honest. People respect that more than if you're not being honest, just to make someone feel better about their situation. I think we need to confront the brutal reality of where we are, um, but also be hopeful in the sense that I
Hmm.
know we're going to get through this. We've gotten through other things just challenging. It doesn't seem like it because this is here right now and it seems super challenging, but there have been world wars, fear, like the Cuban Missile Crisis, Vietnam, World War One, World War Two, SARS, 9/11. So I do know, given time, we will get through this, and letting people
Hmm.
know that we're in it together. Um, and I think being really empathetic. It's easy. Let's say you do have the confidence and you do know we're going to get through this. You have to realize that there are a lot of people that are scared out there, and as a leader, helping them address their fears and actually leading and supporting your people. I'm personally a servant leader. um,
Hmm.
I don't believe in thumping the chest and say everyone follow me. I'm a big believer in supporting our people and providing whatever they need to get whatever they done, what they need to get done. And so if it's providing people with emotional support right now and letting them know that things are going to be okay, I think that's one of our biggest roles as leaders.
That's great. And I'm curious then when you think about leadership and you take from an entrepreneurial perspective and you move that over into the public sector. We talk about, you mentioned the federal government, and you're pleased to see that they acted quickly to get programs out to help support Canadians and to support small business across Canada, which last time I checked, I think employs 92.5% of the workforce in Canada. I'm curious, when you look towards the province of BC and the city of Vancouver, what your thoughts are on how the response has been.
Yeah. So I have to give you a disclaimer right now,
Sure.
because I ran for mayor back in
Yeah.
2018, and I haven't sort of called an end to my political career. So
Right.
that comment any way, which way you want.
Sure.
I do believe in a crisis, which we are in right now. It's everyone's responsibility to support our leaders, our elected officials, regardless of political persuasion. Now is not the time to be cherry picking and like fight battle. Now's the time to support our leaders. And so all the comments I'm going to make are with the view of supporting our mayor, our provincially elected officials, and our federal officials. And I do think, in general, most of them are doing a pretty good job. So the question again was, what can they do better, or what are they doing well?
I think I'm just curious, like, so because you have a view of having run in the mayoral election, and you have a view of the city of Vancouver, you're a long-term resident of the city of Vancouver, and you're a resident of the province of British Columbia. But you have a bit of a different lens than many of us who might not be tapped in in terms of the backroom discussions that happen to make some of these decisions. And I know you're so well connected in both the local and provincial politics. I'm just curious to know what your perspective is on the response so far. I think that's the first question. And then I guess the follow-up question would be, what are the types of things you hope you're going to see, or we're all going to see from our politicians moving forward?
Sure. Okay. So I think from a provincial level, I think the response was great in terms of from a healthcare perspective. I think Adrian Dix and Dr. Bonnie Henry have done an amazing job. And I'm so proud that we can call them our own in BC, because people from around the world are actually looking at how they've handled this crisis. So hats off to them. And I love the fact that we're talking about a gradual reentry now, and there is no playbook. And I don't want to say they're making it up as we go, because that would, that wouldn't be fair. It'd give the wrong impression. I think they've been very thoughtful, and they've realized that there is no playbook. And so they're making up the playbook as we go. And I think they're doing a great job. And so we need to support them. I think we have to realize that we're all in the same boat, and we need to plan for a recovery in the economy. And so whether or not you like big government run programs, or you're a free market person, I think we have to realize that there's no such thing as government money. It's taxpayer money. And if we do not have a strong business environment here where businesses can succeed, we will not have the tax base to actually fund the programs from the government side. And so that's not open to debate. That just is. And so when you look at that, I think we can do a lot of things to support our businesses. I think the employer health tax needs to be revisited, because that's not based on profitability whatsoever. And so you have a lot of situations where, especially in the restaurant industry, where it's really thin margin, you have a lot of employees where you would be paying a lot of that employer health tax, even if you don't make money. And anyone who's not making money, they're going out of business. Anyone who's sort of at the margin, they're going to go, well, we don't make money with this, and so they're going to go out of business. And so we'll actually lose jobs and businesses and tax revenue because of the way that employer health tax is formatted right now. I was
talking to just to add to that, I think I was talking to a restaurateur this weekend who's got 9 locations, and one of the things he said is that they're operating at about 10% of their revenue right now to 15% of their revenue with their takeout business, and that for them to break even as a restaurant, they need to be somewhere around 60% volume. And so that's a huge gap. And if you're still paying the employer health tax through that, you're not even making any money. You're borrowing money now to pay taxes. And so I guess it's an interesting position for an entrepreneur, a business owner to be in, where they're saying, well, I'm borrowing money, even though I can barely stay afloat right now. I'm just sort of keeping the doors open, to keep a few people employed and to keep my brand relevant, I think, in the marketplace. But now I'm needing to borrow money to pay my employer health tax.
Yep. Yeah, no, it's crazy. And maybe I'll digress a little bit, because I
Sure.
think I'm shocked when I give them the stat. When I tell people or ask them the question, like, how much do you think we pay in taxes for every dollar I can pay a shareholder in an after-tax dividend? What do you think that number is?
Okay, so walk us through that in more
Okay,
detail.
so we have shareholders in our company,
Yeah.
and if we want to pay them a dividend, so after everything's said and done, we pay them a dividend from the company, and then they get money after tax. How much do you think we generate in direct and indirect taxes for that $1?
Wow. I don't know, actually. I'm worried, though. I'm worried the number's going to be high.
Take a guess.
Probably 50%.
No, keep going.
It's higher?
Yep.
70%.
Keep going.
You're starting to get into numbers which they're getting a little scary here. So is it higher than 80%?
It's higher.
Well, if it's higher than 90%, you start to get worried about whether or not it makes sense to be in business if you've got 10% left over.
Keep going.
Really?
Yep.
95%?
Keep going.
Well, I'm not going to go to 100, so 99%?
No, it's past 100%.
What? Okay, you got that. Math doesn't make sense to me.
Sorry,
You gotta walk me through
I
that.
didn't want to belabor the point, but for the
Yeah.
fact we had to go through this exercise to show you what the impact is. It's about $100. So think about it. So let me give you an illustrative example. So
Sure.
a restaurant that does $100 or $1 million in sales,
Sure.
they pay GST and PST depending on the province that they're in. So let's say it's 10%.
Sure.
So right there, that's 100 grand.
Yeah.
If you're doing $1 million in sales and you have employees that account for 40% of your cost, that's 400 grand. And so the payroll taxes, the EI, WCB, CPP, all that stuff, guess what? You're add another 100 grand right there. So that's 200 grand. And then when you take all your expenses off, let's say you make 50 grand, and there are all these embedded taxes, and all your cost of sales and every computer you buy,
right,
all your supplies. And so you can see, like, if the average restaurant makes, let's say 3%, or let's say $30,000 in pre-tax profits, then they pay taxes on that as well. Now, I gave you a small example. Let's say the restaurant's bigger, so you actually pay taxes. So all of a sudden, you may be left with 30, like, let's say 20, 30 grand that you can distribute to your shareholders, and then they pay taxes on that. So let's say they're left with $10,000.
So that's 99%, basically.
No, you paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to generate that $10,000 in profit after tax. So it's not a percent. I'm saying for every dollar we can pay someone, we actually have to pay $100 for these direct and indirect taxes that go to build roads, schools, hospitals. And so businesses are actually super important. And if we do not support our businesses, the whole thing unravels. There's a huge multiplier. And so I talked about the employer health tax as an issue. The other thing is minimum wage. And I know that's a very sensitive issue, but it's going up another 5.4% in June, on June 1st. And we're talking about businesses that have lost 50, 60, 80, 100% of their revenue. They have no ability to increase costs that much further. And you can make an argument, well, not everyone gets paid minimum wage, but what happens is when minimum wage goes up, everyone else goes up as well. And so
Hmm.
that's going to have a profound effect on our businesses. Those are things we can do at the provincial level. Um, on the municipal level, um, property taxes is the number one thing that's actually killing all their small businesses across the city. And this actually existed before COVID-19. Now, I don't want to get into the debate of, what happened during the last election and what have you. Let's assume that we're all on the same page looking forward. Um, what we have to realize is we're making, like, everything's a trade-off. And so if we
Hmm.
want to increase property taxes, which the government wants to do, the trade-off is we're going to have more businesses go out of business. We're going to
Hmm.
lose our communities, and more people are going to be unemployed. And so that's one trade-off. The other trade-off is cutting unnecessary spend at the city. And I'm of the view we should do that, just like most of the businesses across the city. Everyone has had, forget the city, the province, the country, and the world. We've all had to pivot.
Hmm.
And the city should be no different. We're all in this together. And,
Hmm.
we need to work accordingly.
And where do you think when you, so that one, I appreciate the example of a restaurateur. I mean, it gets to the point where as a small business that the risk that you're taking, because that small business owner probably has a lease with a landlord,
Yep.
and they may have had to have personally guaranteed that. They may have loans out with the bank for equipment that they have in the restaurant, and they would have had to personally guarantee that. So that's the risk they're taking as a small business owner. The dividends or the profits that come out of that, and the dividends they're able to take out as a shareholder, are really the return for that risk that they're taking. The salary that they take is just the salary that they would have to pay somebody else to run their restaurant. So that's sort of a wash. But the dividend that they pay themselves is their return on that risk. The way you're describing it with the taxation situation, I mean, it's a huge risk for a very small amount of dividend that you get at the end of the day. And you got to start to wonder, is it worth taking the risk? And that worries me because I think, as I said earlier, that one of the things I love about small businesses, particularly Main Street businesses, businesses, one, because they employ a lot of people in our country, but two, they add the vibrancy to our towns and they make them special. I
Yep.
know I've got a favorite coffee shop that I go to. I've got a favorite sushi place that I go to. I've got, all these. I've got a dry cleaner that I love to go to, and part of it is I have a relationship with the people that work at these places. They know me. I know the owners of them, and I don't want them to go away. It's really important to me that they stick around, and I think that it's great that the government is doing things right now to help to support small businesses through this. But you raise a bigger point, which is moving forward, how do we protect these small businesses that are going to have to recover from this when going into COVID, it sounds like they were already struggling from a taxation perspective. I think the other point you bring up as well is around taxation. I remember when the school tax was first introduced, and my first thought was, none of that money is going to schooling because that's not how the government works. The way taxes work, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, is that it doesn't matter what the tax is called, all of that goes into one big bucket. And then each of the departments for the government sets a budget for the year and they draw that money out from that bucket. But when your money goes in, it's not like because it's called a school tax, somehow magically that's going to actually go into supporting any particular school. And it can be a little bit of a PR game by calling a tax something that seems friendly and nice, when in reality it's not actually benefiting the the constituent that you think it actually is benefiting. Am I on the right track there when I say that?
Yeah, you are. You are. And so with the school tax, you can argue. So I'm trying to stay non-political here.
Well, I appreciate that, but at the same
I,
time, like,
yeah,
you're somebody
no,
that I think has a unique viewpoint.
yeah, no, I'll answer your question. So the school tax, regardless if it's good tax, like if it's a good tax policy or not, you're absolutely right. Right now, the school tax is going into general revenues, and
Mhm.
so if we did want a school tax and we believed in the merits of the school tax, then I think what you do is you charge the school tax, but then you say it can only go to pay for schools, and that's not happening. Uh, The second thing is being a resident of the city of Vancouver and loving the city. The school tax, actually, even if it was a school tax dedicated to schools, is not going to the city of Vancouver at all. Because before school tax, we already overfunded our schools through our property taxes. And so it's not even going in the city of Vancouver. And where that becomes,
Is it flowing up into the province then?
it flows into the province. It's a provincial tax.
Ah,
And
okay.
so and this isn't a political thing whatsoever. It's really city of Vancouver versus the province, whatever government is in, whatever political powers in place. It doesn't work for the city of Vancouver. And so, as a resident of Vancouver, I would love to see that changed, because it doesn't help us at all. In fact, it hurts us because it's charged as a property taxes to certain individuals. And so that actually reduces the city of Vancouver's ability to raise tax revenues. And so that's one of the challenges we have right now. We can't raise tax revenues anymore. Our residents, they're struggling with affordability, and our businesses, they're suffering as well because they can't afford the property taxes. And guess what? We've taken a couple $100 million out of the city's ability to raise taxes, and we've given it to the province, who's then putting it into other programs that are not the schools in Vancouver. So that's a big problem.
So let's stick with the city of Vancouver and taxation and just the overall city budget then, because going into COVID, there was a lot of pushback from city council around the budget and the desire to increase the local property taxes. And now that we're in COVID, the news reported, was it last week or the week before, that Kennedy Stewart said that there was a chance that if this went on for long enough, that it could actually bankrupt the city of Vancouver. My understanding from the way that the city charters are set up, and maybe correct me if I have the languaging wrong, you actually can't be bankrupt as a city, like you're not allowed to be. So I'm curious on your thoughts, having been deep into our local politics in the city of Vancouver, when you think about the prospect of the city going bankrupt, and your earlier comment about the need to tighten our belt, as we all have as entrepreneurs, as individuals living in the city, where would you see the tightening coming from? Do you have a lens that you can share with us about where you think the city would need to cut back to protect the city financially for the future?
Sure. That's easy. So to give you a little bit of background, I'm a CPA, or an FCPA. And I spent time in forensic accounting as well in a prior life. But it's actually really simple. We have two buckets. One are the core services that we need to have, for example, police, fire. And then you have, and there, obviously there's some other things there as well. And then everything else is non-core. And look, we live in unprecedented times right now. So I know we'd love to have everything, but at the end of the day, there are a lot of things that we can't afford right now that we can defer. So I'll give you an example. Bramble Street Bridge, we're looking at spending $25 to $50 million to repurpose the bridge. That's great. Whether or not you support it or not, isn't that something that can wait 6 months or a year until we get out of the process? If our choice is to do that at the expense of a bunch of businesses going out of business and people getting kicked out of their homes, as a society, shouldn't we say, okay, you know what? Why don't we push this expense off? Now, I know people who watch this, they're going to make arguments about, oh, well, that comes from a capital account or whatever. You know what? No, let's just look at it from a macro perspective. We don't have to caught in the minutia. And I can tell you, we live in a different time where all bets are off. There's no more playbook. We're reinventing the playbook. So at the end of the day, when you look at it, there's a bunch of money that's going to get spent somewhere. Do we want to spend it on the bridge, or do we want to spend it by supporting our businesses? So that's one example. But I think the bigger thing is literally we go through our income statement at the city on a line by line basis and just literally go, do we need that? Do we need that? Do we need that? Do we need that? And there are going to be a lot of things that we don't necessarily need. I would put a freeze on spending right now And anything above $500, literally that micro needs to get approved. Because how budgets work, especially in a big organization, is everyone gets their budget for the year, and then they say, "Look, a month before the end of the year, we haven't spent to our budget, so we either lose it next year or we spend it." And so they go ahead and spend it, and they buy silly things like chairs that they don't need or just weird stuff. Let's just cut it, like line by line, go through things and just say, "Look, do we really need this?" It's literally that simple. There's also a lot of things that are out of scope that the city shouldn't be working on, but they continue to work on it because they're pet projects. We need to revisit all these pet projects and say, look, let's not do those expenses right now because we have a
And
big.
what are some examples of those types of pet projects that you see in the city right now that you would say, hey, this probably could wait? Like this isn't something that's necessary for us to be putting money into right now.
Okay, some of the things I say may be controversial.
That's
Uh,
okay.
I'll start with this one. So, look, I forget the actual numbers, but when you look at the city, the budget that they proposed for 2020, there was about $6 million that went to supporting businesses and special events. Well, there are going to be no events this year.
Mhm.
That's the reality. And instead of spending money to support businesses, why don't we just not charge them expenses? That would actually support them more. That would give them what they want. That's an easy
Mhm.
$6 million right there. The controversial thing is the environment. Okay, there's I think another $6 million spent allocated towards the environment. And by the way, I'm a hardcore environmentalist. That's why I live in Vancouver. That's why most of us live in Vancouver. And I'm not saying we do not support the environment. The environment's gotten a big holiday over the last 2 months. Like literally, they are seeing dolphins in the canals in Venice, and you can see the Himalayas from London, which they haven't been able to do in 30 years. And so, are there some expenses that we could push off for 4 months? Right? Like that would be another example of getting really prudent, realizing that traffic across the city has gone down substantially, and I can tell you, you know, the environment we have a lot of challenges that we will address, but can we just like wait 3 to 4 months and actually work on the triage to make sure that a lot of our businesses that will not survive the next 3 weeks if this situation doesn't change, can we work on them first? So those are two examples. And look,
Mhm.
I know these decisions are really tough because if they weren't, they would have already been made. But I think
Sure.
everyone in the city has to take a hard look at what we're doing and saying, look, there is a trade-off here. What do we actually want? And make that decision accordingly.
I mean, you bring up an interesting point about the difference between canceling a project and just pressing pause on it. I think, we work with a lot of large organizations, many of which are public, and when they run into financial difficulties, usually it's in the public case, it's because of the market. Their share prices dropped, and they say we're going to pause travel, we're going to pause hiring, we're going to pause some perks, but they're pauses, right? And they say like we're going to pause it for a period of time, and then we're going to reevaluate. And when we pull through the other side of this, then we will, start these things back up again. So they're not canceling them altogether. I like that approach because it honors the situation that we're in. It doesn't take away the importance of something like the environment, as you suggested, or the $6 million or whatever it was, $12 million or $25 million to take out. I think you're referring to taking out the clover leaves that come off the Granville Street Bridge, allowing those two sites to be developed, and then actually doing the improvements to add bike lanes and those sorts of things to the Granville Street Bridge. So I think you're right. Like, yeah, long term, that sounds like a great idea for Vancouver.
Yep.
Is it necessary today? No, we're doing fine without it. So there is the opportunity to start those things back up again when it makes sense. I also love your comment that you made about why are we taking $6 million from businesses and taxes and then sending that $6 million right back to help businesses? Why not just not tax them in the first place and take in that money? Because it seems kind of like a circular event. And as a business owner, I'd rather be taxed. I'd rather not be taxed and then have to pick up a subsidy on the back end, because there's a delay from when I'm paying the tax and then that subsidy actually kicking in and affecting me. And I know as a business owner, I want to keep people employed, and lowering taxes helps me to keep people employed. And that's something that's important to me, both for my culture, but also just as like a human being. It's important to me. If there's any way that I can keep people employed, I want to do that.
Sure.
Ken, I'm curious, as you think about, moving forward, this would be letting the cat out of the bag, but I assume your intent is to run again in the next mayoral election. I don't know if you've actually announced that yet, or your intentions.
What I'm telling people is I would really like to run again. So.
Okay. So that's great. I would love it. Obviously, I supported you in your last run because we've known each other for a long time, and you're somebody that I trust, admire, and respect. I think you have a very balanced viewpoint. I've always known that about you. You seem to have you take in a lot of information, and you think about the long term. And I think that what's required right now, as you said, is quick action and then iteration by our politicians, but always maintaining that long-term focus of we're trying to achieve something as a city, we're trying to achieve something as a province long-term, and not to take our eye off that ball, even if we have to press pause. I'm curious, when you think about running in the election coming up, what are the 2 or 3 things that anyone listening to this interview, if they were to remember Ken and think, okay, I know Ken stands for these 2 or 3 things, what are the sort of 2 or 3 things that if you're going to build a campaign that you want to focus on?
Well, that's a big question. Look, from a very simplistic point of view, we just want things to work, right? We just want things to work, and maybe I'll answer it a different way. I'll describe my background. So I grew up immigrant parents. I went to 5 elementary schools in 7 years, not because we're flipping real estate. It's because we couldn't make rent. And, we got through that. And when I was growing up, Vancouver was this amazing place where you could get an education, you could start a career, you could start a business, you could raise a family, and you had community. And you could afford to live in a place. And now it's not so much the case. And I have 4 boys and a bunch of family and friends, neighbors, coworkers, people that I mentor, and a lot of people are leaving. And my 4 boys, they don't see a future for themselves in Vancouver. So that's why I'm very passionate about how the city works, and I want to help in which way I can. And so back to my comment, we just want stuff to work. And get back to, get back to a situation. I think the past is the past, and we're not going to the past. But in the past, things did work, and we had opportunity. So I think at the end of the day, I've spoken to literally like 20,000 people in the city now since April of 2018 when I first ran. And I can tell you, we do not have a lack of great ideas. What we have right now is a lack of people listening to these great ideas, and then having the political courage to actually, implement these ideas. Because a lot of people, not all, but a lot of people that run for political office, and by the way, there's some great people, so like this comment is going to hopefully doesn't come across the wrong way, but the system's set up where people only think 2 years out because they're worried about getting reelected, and they're worried about not offending people, and they're worried about making a decision that's going to be controversial. And what happens is the important things that we need to get done don't get done. You first opened with leadership. Leadership isn't doing what everyone thinks you should do and taking the easy way out. Leadership, part of it is doing things that you know are right, despite the fact that people may think you're nuts, or they may not, there will be a vocal minority that are incredibly against it and doing it anyways. And that's what we need more of in the city.
Well, I appreciate your time today. One of your boys snuck in the background there, so I would love to get you back to being a dad. Thanks for making time to have a conversation today. And I know that some of my questions were unexpected. I appreciate that you gave us candid answers to those questions. I always enjoy getting a chance to chat with you because I walk away having learned something. I learned about the realities of what it takes to lead at the provincial level, of what it means locally, of what it means for you as a business owner, and just a better idea of what it means to be a Vancouverite and what types of changes I need to be able to be okay with, so that we continue to pull through this. So thanks for making the time to have the conversation, Ken.
Great. Thanks for having me. And what I'd like to leave you with, and the reason I think you're awesome, is you get so involved. You don't have to do this, but you do it anyways for the betterment of our communities. And I think like-minded people are attracted to each other. And that's why, we've had a friendship that spans a couple of decades now. What I tell people, and this isn't just a municipal thing, it's a provincial and federal thing. If you like what's going on right now, great, you don't have to do anything. But if you don't like what's going on and you want to see improvements, you need to get active, and you need to, get informed, and then you need to have your say, regardless of how you vote or whatever. Please get involved. That's what makes our community stronger. And so, thank you very much for your time. And when this is all over, let's grab a beer
and a bagel. Yeah. Ken, hey, as we close off here, if people want to stay in touch with you, and as you decide whether or not you're going to run in the upcoming election, they want to understand more about what you think is needed in the city of Vancouver. Do you have a website or someplace where they can go to keep in touch with you, an email list, something like that?
Yeah, sure. The best thing to do is hit my website, kensim.ca. Once again, that's kensim.ca, and then subscribe. You basically just give us your email address, and that way we can stay in touch. And I send out a newsletter from time to time, and you'll keep in the loop.
Great.
Great.
Awesome. Thanks, Ken. Have a good day.
Thanks. Later.